listening to the 14th source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am exhausted.
I think we both are.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Aspel.
And we are your two overeducated, exhausted, and codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses.
In what may be our lowest energy episode in months.
Right, we're all just droopy dogging it here. This is the episode for Friday, April 22nd.
April 22nd, 2022.
22, Droopy Doo, here we go.
Sorry, I apologize. It's like, what's going on? Like, I don't know, man. We just started recording. We're both like, woof. It's tire time.
It's tire time. Tire time talk with Click and Clack, the Tappet Brothers. We're here to address all your car needs. Give us a question, we can fix it. Andrew, let's fix this.
This automotive problem. Mm-hmm. I love car.
You're like, have you ever played, I don't know, Nerd Thing?
Nerd Thing.
You
know, this is, it's funny. Humble Bundle had a bundle last week that was a bunch of simulation games. And they had a game, Farming Simulator, which I've seen advertised on Steam like all the time. And there's a one for every year. Farming Simulator 2010, 2011.
Sure, got to keep that updated.
And they all have the, they have the same kind of font styling of like Flight Simulator. So you think, is this Microsoft? No, it's some other company that only makes one game, Farming Simulator. But what's weird is you talk about like mechanical things and whatever. The game very clearly advertised like over 300 different licensed tractors and farm equipment. And it's like a car game, right? Like, you can drive all the hot new cars, except it's like John Deere, Caterpillar, and whoever else.
Keep your on the speedometer. I'm gonna make this baby peak at 15 miles an hour.
I'm gonna plow this field.
Redlining. Look at me, Fast and Furious. I think not.
So anyway, I thought of that when you were talking about car parts.
Well, there's even long haul trucking simulators where it's like similar to a Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's like, do you want to drive from Los Angeles to New York in 1-to-1 ratios? Do you want to drive across the panhandle of Texas where there's literally nothing?
Well, so I think about this, indie developer and commentator Rami Ismaili. Ismaili. Yeah. He actually is a big flight simulator guy and a pilot, and he actually made like big news, like mainstream news, when he flew across the Atlantic. Playing flights, he was in a passenger plane. He was in a airplane, but he actually when he took off in like New York City going to the Netherlands, he started a game of Flight Simulator, taking off the same plane from New York City, flying to the Netherlands, and literally just flew the same flight he was on for 12 hours.
He's like, and I got there earlier. What's up with that? Do you know who else is also a trained and licensed pilot?
Who?
A gentleman named Drew Scanlon. That name may not ring a bell. He is also known as Blinking White Guy from the Internet GIF Foundation. That's not a foundation, but I call that. Have you ever seen the Blinking White Guy GIF?
He's a pilot.
It's a gentleman. His name is Drew Scanlon. He was the video producer for the video game website GiantBomb.com for years, who eventually left to start his own venture called Cloth Map, where it was like a docuseries where he went around the world documenting how different cultures and countries game, for lack of a better word. And he's a really cool dude. And he got into flight sim so much, I'm guessing it's similar to Rami, he just became a pilot. I'm sure he knows Rami.
Yeah, probably, right? Small community.
It is. And apparently they're all pilots.
So now, so really to end this thread, what we want to see is someone who rides in a truck across country, playing a truck driving simulator of the same route.
Yep.
Across country.
Yeah, and for us to actually give automotive advice, they should release like Car Shop Simulator.
Well, and the thing is, there are games like that, right? There's also like Build Your Own Computer Simulator, which is like,
oh, really?
Okay, yeah, you have to like.
It sounds like does it double as like a bomb defusing simulator?
Well, I mean, you have to buy the best video cards and whatever.
How do you have one-to-one ratio in terms of waiting for video cards to stop being purchased by Bitcoin farmers.
I don't know if there's like an option to turn off crypto farmers buying all the goddamn video cards. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of gaming is weird. I think that's the takeaway from that interlude.
Yeah, indeed. And the thing is, when we game, we're making choices in order to make our lives happier. And so because of that, we are going to do a Week in Geek this week. So if you don't mind starting, Andrew, what was your Week in Geek like this week? What brought you joy? What brought you a thoughtful consideration of being a nerd and nerdiness?
So actually, I've been thinking about this. I discovered something called television.
What?
But specifically not like, TV has been weird since the pandemic, right? Kind of the normal television schedules are all screwed up. The shows are kind of coming out just when they come out, a lot more than they used to, I feel.
Right.
And it is kind of the point where I'm just not paying attention to a lot of things anymore. I was actually surprised that the Doctor Who Easter special kind of snuck up on me. I was like, oh,
yeah. It totally did. Yeah.
And so, but the in kind of this weird state of timelessness, I discovered some TV streaming services that I hadn't really been watching that much.
Right.
That I had Apple TV and HBO Max are two that like I don't really I watched a few things and then kind of didn't really log in. But so there's actually a lot of stuff on those channels. So I was like, oh look, there's a lot of stuff here that might be interesting, and some of it has been, and some of them, the ones I'm watching on Apple TV, including the show Pachinko, the show Severance. I want to say more about those, but I'm not done with them. Pachinko is actually not even done.
You watched that historical drama about going to space?
Right. For All Mankind. Although that one's between the season 3 starts in June or July.
New Jon Stewart shows on Apple Plus.
Right. However, I did watch a show again that I didn't really know about until like I started watching it. I actually think my partner started watching it. Our Flag Means Death, which is it's a pirate show that's executive produced and starring Taika Waititi and
Rhys Darby, right?
And Rhys Darby is the main character, Stead Bonnet. And it's about
the Gentleman Pirate.
The Gentleman Pirate, and it's sort of a comedy rom-com. Like it's silly.
I've seen the fan art on Twitter and Instagram and and on Tumblr.
The back half of the show definitely has a lot more rom-com. I think the first half, like people say, like what's this show about? And the first 3 episodes are kind of like finding a place. But it's definitely it's a light show. Very silly show, but it's about Stead Bonnet, who again the Gentleman Pirate, who if you don't know, this was a guy that was basically like a rich landowner in the Bahamas, I think, who just one day is like, fuck it, he leaves his family and buys a ship and sets out to sea to be a pirate. You're like, what? You're the guy that normally gets pirated. The one thing about so it's a silly show, and it's got just the cast is all sorts of goofy people in kind of being very silly. But in a fun way. I enjoyed it. But what's interesting about it, and the thing that I thought was just the more I thought about it, especially once it was over, is it features quite a few like real historical pirates.
Yeah.
Right. There's Stead Bonnet himself. There's Blackbeard, Calico Jack, and what's weird about it is, these guys all knew each other. They were all like. The golden age of piracy was like 2 years, it's from like 1718 to 1719 or something.
Speaking of small communities, right? Despite being spread across a large ocean, right? Well, especially in the Caribbean and stuff like that. Yeah, it was all very tight.
And it reminded me a little bit of, just aside from the show, but like the kind of this idea of like, hey, all these guys all knew each other and they kind of like hung out. It reminded me of the old comedy series Yacht Rock, where it was this idea like, wait, did you realize that like this person and this person collaborated on the song? It's like, did you know that Stead Bonnet and Blackbeard were like romping around for 6 months doing pirating? And then they knew Calico Jack. And the thing is, I played Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag, which was the pirate themed Assassin's Creed, and it kind of does the same thing.
It does,
And when I played Assassin's Creed, I wrote it off as, it's Assassin's Creed, it's all bullshit. But but again, no, these guys all, again, the golden age of piracy that we often talk about is like this very narrow window where all these notable pirates tended to be. So it's just this really interesting thing of like, but it is a silly show. And I think that's what I liked about it is it isn't too serious. It was like, it almost feels like this thing where like the writer, I forget the writer's name, the head writer, I guess he pitched it, and Taika Waititi, as I understand, had just finished filming Thor: Love and Thunder and was like, all right, let's do this show. And it's kind of a bottle show, right? They have one major set, ship,
the ship, yeah,
and then they have a few like, and it's not. I don't think there's a lot of location shooting in this show, right? Like, it's a pretty narrow number of sets, but it is extraordinarily silly, right? Like the first episode has to do with basically, this idea that Stead Bonnet's not very good at pirating, and he gets the crew together to try sewing a flag, and they have like a contest who can make the most fearsome flag, right? And it's like, it is absurd, but it's fun.
In the trailer, we see a flag that has a cat licking its paw. I'm like, that's adorable. I don't know if that's part of the show, but it's...
Well, and one thing to realize is some of these flags are, like, when you realize all these pirates had their own flags, and they all did kind of look really ridiculous. So I enjoyed it. I think it's a great cast. I think they did a really great, a great job with kind of this story. And again, yes, if you haven't seen it on Twitter, it is a rom-com. There is a primary relationship, which is comically unexpected if you did not know what you were getting into. This was my case, right? I'm watching it like, this is a weird show. It's kind of fun. And then I find out like, oh yeah, no. Yeah, they have there's a thing. there's a loving relationship that develops throughout this show. I mean, the one thing is, I don't think it's been officially renewed for another season. It does kind of end on you need another season.
Oh, it does? Okay.
I would say, I don't want to call it a cliffhanger, but it leaves on an unresolved ending. It ends, which I like is frustrating. I always hate that because if it doesn't get renewed, then the show ended in a shitty way, But hopefully they'll get another season. And the funny thing is that, like, look, man, these guys don't, like, there's a pretty short clock on these guys' lives, so it's like you're not going to get a seven season show. I mean, the realization that, like, you look it up, like, oh yeah, Stead Bonnet and Blackbeard were traveling together for like 6 months in 1718, and then in 1719 they're both dead. Like within a month of each other. You're like, oh, okay. Granted, who knows where they go with it, because it's a silly show, right? You don't need to pretend like it's a historical narrative. We're not putting this in the history books. Especially not in Florida.
No.
But what I'd say, I think the overall was, it wasn't, I had not heard anything about it when I started watching it. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of fun. It was not a big investment. It's 10 episodes, about 30 minutes apiece, Mm-hmm. It's lighthearted, when so many other shows can be kind of serious and a downer. Like I said, I think I mentioned I was watching Severance and Pachinko on Apple TV, which are both like anything but lighthearted. Or Moon Knight, which is like, hey, do you want to have serious sadness about mental illness? So it's like, it's nice to be, hey, let's just have a fun show about pirates and kissing,
Right. That's good. That's good. So basically what we're saying is, hey, you want to learn more about pirate history? Watch Our Flag Means Death, a historical rom-com, and play Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. And then play Freedom Cry and the DLC Freedom Cry and just...
Learn all this real history. But yeah, it is obviously not for everyone, but I think what I've liked about it, especially kind of just how the world has been kind of serious and a downer, it was nice to have something that's just mostly just being very silly,
Right. And you say the silly quotient is pretty high?
Oh yeah. There's a whole scene that I think floats around social media of Stead Bonnet and Blackbeard, played by Rhys Darby and Taika Waititi, and it's this whole scene about them talking about if Blackbeard opens a restaurant and what kind of restaurant it would be, and it's like it's this kind of just, and apparently it was all like just kind of ad-libbed by Waititi and Darby. But just, it's the kind of show it is. It's like this just absurd conversation of two people just having like, yeah, I'd open a restaurant. It'd be real good. Yeah. Oh, and could I go to your restaurant? No, there's a waiting list. You can't come in. And then it's like that. It's just that cute little conversation. Yeah. It's just fun. So I enjoyed it. I recommend it. It's a good time.
Well, cool. I've been meaning to check it out, and that pushed up the list for sure.
Yeah, and there's no spoilers there other than the fact that it's a little bit rom-com, which is not what you'd expect,
from
when
a
you start
pirate
that
show. Right?
And it's, I mean, the one thing that is kind of delightful about it is it really opens with this: the gentleman pirate is a gentleman, not a pirate, right? And the first episode kind of sets the course of the show when he accidentally kills a naval officer that he went to boarding school with. And actually, he doesn't kill him. Basically, the naval officer trips and dies. And then they're like, okay, you can't tell anyone that he tripped. You have to say you killed him, right? And so that's the shtick, is like this idea that he develops this reputation based on, he tripped on his own sword. Fun nonetheless. But yeah, so that was my Week in Geek. Dan, what about you?
Our flag means death. A surprising, sort of like optimistic and fun, silly show, despite having death in the title. I have a similar Week in Geek, albeit with video games.
You also watched Our Flag Means Death.
Yeah, real weird. I should have piped up when you were talking about it. No, I've been playing a video game called Death's Door.
Okay.
And based on the premise, you would expect one thing, and ultimately you get another. It's an indie game developed by Acid Nerve out of the UK, published by Devolver. So Devolver has developed quite a portfolio of games. I think this fits in nicely with their portfolio. It's a small game. It's very focused, but very fully realized. And the premise is this: you play as a crow, naturally, because in this world, crows are Grim Reapers, and it is your job to harvest souls to bring them into the afterlife, right? And the game borrows as much from the NES and Super NES Legend of Zelda games, being that's an isometric kind of top-down slice with the sword, dodge, that kind of stuff.
Right.
It borrows as much from that as it does from, thematically and I think tonally, it borrows more from Grim Fandango, because you're introduced to this crow character by going to get a soul, and the way it works is that you kind of like Monsters Incorporated, a door drops down from this sort of ether, and you go through the door to harvest the soul that needs to go to the great beyond. Adventure ensues, but as you're about to deliver the killing blow to this soul, you get knocked out, and you are deprived of the soul you're sent to collect, which causes problems in the system. And by the system, I mean you wake up and the soul you meant to harvest is gone, and so you go back through the door and you go back to your headquarters, which is just an office that's managed by other crows, and they're like, you lost your soul? That doesn't happen. 2, you gotta fix it. There's crows sitting around typing on typewriters and shit like that, and others that are kind of managing books and whatnot. It's your job to kind of unbreak the system. You come across this idea that the system as it is not how it's supposed to be. Something happened years ago where sort of the gods of this realm, the lords of the doors, kind of made some sort of deal where crows would become reapers. And the deal is this: if the crows are immortal, unless they lose, unless something like this happens. And so the basic narrative thrust is that your crow has become mortal until you find the soul that you lost. And to do that, you go through these different maps isometrically. You gain sort of a Metroidvania aspect to it, where you have where as you go through these different levels, you gain new tools, new spells, and stuff like that. And it's a good time. It reminds me a lot of Moonlighter. Was it Moonlighter? No, Yeah, Moonlighter. If you liked that game, you would like this game. It's actually a much more focused game than Moonlighter was, because basically, I'm near the end at this point. There's kind of a main hub world, and you are tasked when you find this other old crow who's trying to get through death's door, but he needs 3 big souls to unlock it. Apparently getting through that door will help you solve your problem. And so basically there's 3 big bosses you got to go find and fight. And that opens up the end game scenario. And it's cool. It's cool. You get classic classic Zelda stuff where you get like a fireball you can shoot, or bombs you can drop to open up new areas. You get a grapple hook so you can go across pits and stuff like that. But it's kind of Metroidvania-ish in that even though it's presented with like these are the 3 bosses you got to go beat, they say like you should probably go left. And you realize if you go right to go try to fight another boss, you can't get through there because you don't have the grappling hook yet. But it's just a good, well-realized game that feels really good, that plays really well, that captures kind of all the best parts of that 8-bit and 16-bit Zeldas, while also updating it and throwing a level of difficulty with regard to the bosses that you encounter that I think maybe pulls from maybe more recent gaming styles like the Dark Souls games, where it's like, okay, what it is, and honestly, Dark Souls games are just modern interpretations of old NES and 16-bit bosses of like you got to learn the patterns so you can beat the boss, and so you're kind of throwing yourself at these bosses as you learn their patterns and phases to defeat them. And so it's been challenging but not impossible, and I've just been blazing through it because it's so much fun. and again, you're literally a crow with a sword on your back,
like most crows.
And if you idle long enough, what I love about it, and this pops up in like the cutscenes and stuff, because all the cutscenes are in engine. You're just a crow, so like your head's bobbing all around, getting looking around, like there's no sense of seriousness here at all, and it's just great. And visually it's beautiful. I know a similar game that has been getting a lot of traction really recently called Tunic seems to echo a lot of what I'm talking about here, except that one seems to be even a bit more esoteric and opaque in terms of what it's doing. Like that game borrows as much from what was that really systematically opaque game from a couple of years, Fez. It borrows as much from Fez as it does from Legend of Zelda or whatever. This game is very straightforward, very clear. What I like about it is that progression means that you're getting better at the game. To actually get like more health added to your health bar, to get more magic added to your magic bar is actually a feat, and I think you can only really add 1 pip to each overall. So it's really like if you come up against a wall where you can't get through this challenge room, for lack of a better word, you once you do accomplish it, it's because you got better at the game, not because you went and grinded and became and increased your stats. It's just like you actually learned the patterns, you dodged the attacks, and you figured out how to get through without dying. It's kind of like a neat little old school experience that I wasn't expecting, and I'd heard a lot about it, but didn't think I'd like it as much as I do. But man, it is fun as hell.
That's cool. I mean, it's the one thing I've found recently. I talked about playing through Final Fantasies 1 through 6. I've been playing some other old games, but also some games that are like old games. And there is something about certain types of games and certain like aesthetics of games that I actually really find I prefer. And like the idea of something like a Super Nintendo era Zelda-like game is like, oh, okay, that's probably in the wheel. Like I played Moonlighter a lot. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too.
And it's a weird thing of like I'm starting to realize more and more like I like these things, and then sometimes I see some games that are like of a different era. I'm like, oh, I actually realize I don't think I like those. Like, it's just that weird thing where you kind of realize, oh, okay, certain types of games. I think I'm old enough that I don't play all games now, right? I just don't have the time, don't care.
Well, I think especially with Death's Door, with Moonlighter, with Tunic most recently, I think we're actually seeing a lot of exploration into what that sort of isometric Zelda type game can be. It doesn't have to just be a Zelda game. Like there's actually lots of things you can do with that aesthetic and with that angle that is more, complex or more simple. That I think Zelda, and we could talk about Zelda, because I think both you and I would agree, like the definition of what Zelda was changed when they went to the Nintendo, when they entered the world of 3D, right? And I'm sure there's DNA that links those two eras, but we've definitely been in the 3D era longer than we were in the isometric top-down view era. And it's cool seeing if Nintendo won't do it. I'm glad to see independent companies going back to that style and going like, well, what can we do with this?
Right.
Which goes back to something we preach all the time when we're not bitching about NFTs, which is independent games. Independent games are kind of like where it's at for innovation, as far as we're concerned, you and I. And some of the most engaging experiences that I've had in the last 10, 20 years of gaming have been playing indie games. And I think that rate, that percentage is even higher for you, because you don't really engage a lot of quote-unquote AAA games.
I don't. Which is, it's weird. Like, that when I realized, like, the last couple games, I mean, I guess I played Final Fantasy, right? Those
pixel remasters, you sell out.
Those were AAA games at one point.
Still are, man.
But no, it's that weird thing that, whenever I see advertisements for the actual AAA games, I'm like, yeah, I'm not playing those. But there was this, because actually I did recently play a new game that's not AAA, but it got me thinking a lot about this idea of like, what is it that I'm being attracted to with these games? When I think of like all the games that I've been playing recently, that are all like, yeah, they're all kind of like pixel graphics. They look like fancy versions of something from the Super Nintendo to early PlayStation era, you know. What is it that attracts me to that, and why is it now I'm to the point where like if I don't see that, I'm not as interested? So,
well, that makes me wonder, like as culture goes forward and nostalgia goes forward, like indie games are going to be pulling from a different era, beyond our era of nostalgia. They're going to be pulling from PS1, PS2 games, and like, will you find those games as energizing and interesting and engaging once maybe the indie industry moves away from pixel graphics and the styles of the games we grew up with to the style of games that the new younger developers grew up with.
And that's definitely, it's that's something we'll see, because I think the indie games are already doing that.
Sure. Oh no, they absolutely are.
And that's I do think the one thing I think what we see in video game development now, especially indie development, is that a AAA studio may not make a game like Death's Door or whatever, right? But these smaller teams can do it and find success in doing it, which is why we're seeing them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there may be other games that people do like that as well, but I think it's only because it's easier to distribute to a worldwide audience, and
Yeah, well, I mean, what's that game that came out last year that was like on the top of a lot of people's list? Inscription? Did you hear about that game? Like that game
also by Devolver,
up.
Published by Devolver.
Published by Devolver, yeah, but like a small development team, if not one guy. But like that game blew up. It hit mainstream media in a way, not all mainstream media, but a lot of mainstream gaming media, because people are just raving about it. And so like the thing is also, there is the nostalgia bent, and they were kind of trading in the nostalgia of like early or 90s sort of trading card games and stuff like that. But also playing with the meta, playing with and playing with innovation in terms of what games can and cannot be, to the point where it's indie, it's small, made by a very small team, if not in the case of that game, not made by one guy or person, can break through and actually influence popular culture where people are playing AAA games and playing indie games. And that's the cool thing, I think, that the democratization of the internet and of gaming with things like storefronts like Steam or the console systems where they they can put on the front page, indie games that they maybe are supporting or created some sort of agreement with, where they or I think Microsoft is doing this really well with their Game Pass system, where like you subscribe to this subscription service. Look at all these games that are available to you that you wouldn't play otherwise because you have to pay for them.
And you get a chance to play it.
Yeah.
And maybe enjoy it, and then if it leaves the service, maybe you buy it.
Yeah. And so it's never been a better time, there has never been a better time to play video games, honestly. And the best part is that there's a lot of really good video games out there. And you know what? Death's Door is one of them.
Yeah.
And so please check it out. It's not super long. It's nice and challenging, but not challenging to the point where I wanted to break a controller, which is a problem with me. I haven't broken a controller. I have broken a Street Fighter II machine at a bowling alley, but that's the extent of the damage that I've wrought.
Wow.
I was young and very angry. You know what? Fuck Sagat. So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can find us on other social media, such as Twitter and Instagram. On Twitter, you can find us on our respective handles, which means you can find Andrew tweeting about tabletop role-playing games and other assorted things at Profound Dark, and you can find me at Bethel, or you can find us on Instagram, where you can find Andrew at Profound Brick, and me and my work at Bethel Comics.
Well, you're on our website at forallintents.net. You can also take a look at our YouTube page, which you can find by clicking on the link in the corner. You may also be listening to this show on YouTube, because we now repeat our show on YouTube.
Like
so there you go.
And subscribe. That's what you're supposed to say, right?
Ring the bell.
Rusty agrees. I don't know if you can hear that. We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disc of Medusae, the other is called District 4. They're both written and performed by Kevin McLeod of the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io. That's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 Attribution License.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to go to their storefront and leaving some sort of review, whether a text review or using the proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. Well, you mentioned Our Flag Means Death.
I did.
And we can't let it go by because a teaser, albeit let's just call it a trailer, because that's what it is, for another Taika Waititi jam dropped this last week.
Thor, Love and Thunder.
Thor Thursday, Love and Thunder, which features, and I'm going to be specific about this, the Mighty Thor, which is the official name given to the Jane Foster Thor that shows up.
Is that what she's called?
I'm actually excited about this. I am on record saying I'm not the biggest fan
of Thor.
Not of Thor, but of the last film, Ragnarok. I think it's fine, but I don't know. There's something about this trailer that gets me hyped. I don't know why. Maybe I because the silly Thor is now kind of established. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to accept a silly Thor. But you know what? They're having fun. It looks like fun. I'm going to shut up and watch it and enjoy it because it seems like it's going to be a good time. And it's the last standing. It's the last franchise standing of the original Avengers characters.
Well, there's a Captain America 4, but that's starring.
But not Steve.
No, it's the last of the original actors in their own film.
Wow. So there you go.
What is interesting, I will say about it, that they had they released the posters as well. And what I liked about it is that they have one poster and it shows Thor holding up whatever the axe he makes in Infinity War.
What they call that one, yeah.
And it says the one and only Thor, Love and Thunder. Then they have another poster that has Natalie Portman holding up Mjolnir, and it says the one is not the only Thor, Love and Thunder. And it's just that kind of stuff that who knows what they're going to do with these. I suspect this is not going to lead to a lot more movies, but it looks like it'll be fun.
Yeah, that's all we can hope for. Fun. So until you have fun, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
Well, we use two types of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae. The other is called District 4. They're both written and performed by Kevin McLeod, the Clan McLeod. I lost my train of thought. We use two tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae. The other is called District 4. They're both written and performed by Kevin McLeod, the Clan McLeod. Graph paper enthusiast, musician extraordinaire.
Immortal swordsman as well.
And immortal swordsman, from what I understand.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
What boss were you killing?
The sand beast in the Middle Ages.
That's my favorite middle-aged boss, aside from taxes and back pain. I just bought the novelization to Highlander. I am going to have a great summer.